Why would he climb in a boat like that?
I don't know, you think, I mean,
He had,
getting
he had all
offshore.
kinds of splints and stuff. He looked like somebody made him in the basement. He had
Crashed motorcycles and all that shit.
Yeah. But back to our discussion of laminate strength. You could get NASA to design a laminate that would be very good. Nobody knows what every load is.
Yeah.
When you're running a fast boat, you get yourself a wave that looks like a mold up there and fits the boat. I don't give a shit what it is, it's gonna break.
Yeah.
That's all there is to
It's,
it.
water gets pretty solid the faster you go.
Yeah.
Oh God, what's his name? Popeyes.
Copeland?
Copeland, yeah. He came around and at our shop, this is about a year before he passed away, you know.
Yeah.
And he was getting ready to build this really high-speed catamaran, and he had this he was gonna run 250, 300 miles an hour or something. Do you know what the pressures are on that?
I do.
They think that, yeah, I know you do, but he didn't. And you know, because it keeps squaring itself as it goes up. I says, my God, I says, you're running through concrete, you know?
Yeah.
You know, and I guess he went back and rethought it a little bit after that, but it's just like, oh, another 10 miles an hour. But no, you know, it's velocity squared times .0047, you know? It really builds quick.
So in the 60s,
Yeah.
did you guys get any tech backup from the manufacturers of the material?
Yeah.
Able to give you a
They
lot
didn't
of
know
data?
anything.
Yeah.
We told them, they didn't tell us.
That's what I was wondering, yeah.
Yeah, most of the time they come down and say, well, what do you think about this?
Yeah.
Or do you think this Kevlar will work?
They
Yeah,
give
they're
us all kinds
building-
of stuff to try.
Yeah, they would sometimes give you a laminate recommendation. It was the same on both sides. And that isn't what you necessarily would build, because you got framing on one side, you have impact for crap in the water on the other side.
Right.
So you don't necessarily have a balanced laminate. I remember some young fellow that was, oh, you gotta have a balanced laminate. Yeah, okay. You go build a boat and you'll find out, you know.
Yeah, well-
That's how you find out, is the hard way.
The laboratory is not quite the same as the
Oh, boy,
ocean.
I sunk a few times, you know.
The big thing that we did over at Bertram that, I don't know how long other people caught on to it, but we would punch it, you punch a bulkhead right through the bottom of the boat. So what we started doing is all of our bulkheads in the race boat, we'd use mat row and mats, like 1/4 inch of glass, right down where the bulkhead was gonna be, 18 inches wide. And then we set the bulkhead in that wet glass and let it kick. Once it kicked, sand the inside of it, and then we used just styrofoam that was 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches.
Under the bulkhead?
And we glued that to each side of the bulkhead, so it got a little triangle.
Yeah.
And then we come over that with mat row and mat row and mat. And that's where we tied all of our bulkheads in, and we never broke another bulkhead after that.
They don't do that anymore.
Oh, no, I
When you
don't
told
think,
Preston
they
where
get,
it was
you
gonna
get all
raise
the
now?
new stuff.
Do you do that anymore?
Sure we do.
Yeah, we did that.
Not on every
for-
boat. I mean, you
We
can't.
did that for years with the
Yeah,
whole
it
race
it
boats.
depends, it depends on what you're building. I mean, if you're building an inexpensive production boat, you're not gonna do that. But
Oh,
if you're
no, we
doing a
didn't do
custom
it
boat, you'll do it.
We did it on race boats, not on production boats.
Yeah.
But it stopped the bulkheads from going through the bottom of the boat.
On your tabbing, did you go from small to larger, or on the widths of the tabbing? On the
Oh, and the
bulkheads?
width of the
Yeah.
thing?
Did you
We
start-
started out with an 18-inch strip,
Yeah,
and then the next thing was 17 and a
So you
half and
started out wide and got
16.
the
We
small.
tapered it down, so you gotta diminish, you can't create a stress riser in there
Mm-hmm.
and then drop the thing, but everything was a gradual. Get rid of that stress riser.
Yeah.
what about transoms?
When it comes to construction now, what these fellows are dealing in is racing.
Yeah.
And racing, you're right at the ragged edge all the time. Is this thing gonna survive, and is it light as I can possibly make it?
Yep.
And then the other thing is, like Michael deals with, is manufacturers building little pleasure boats.
Right. Different
Sometimes
deal,
you sacrifice some weight, you know, I mean, some of them do certain things that you wouldn't do if it was your boat.
Right,
You know, but for economics, they do that. And we did a lot of boats where we used a stringer interliner system. You know, you molded the inside, two halves, and you
Yeah.
dropped it in a paste that you put in with a serrated trowel and pull a vacuum on it and suck it in. And they were pretty strong boats. The Seabirds, my God, I still see some of them things around, and we built them in the late 60s, early 70s. We built like 7,000 boats. And they were balsa cord too, and they
Yep.
held up. So
Yep.
you don't know. You get lucky, I guess. I don't know what's going on. I've been mostly out of the marine industry. I think we did a few boats every now and then, you know, but not too often, because we're working on this engine project for the last 8 years. Brownie's been working with me on that, but you probably know what's going on in the marine industry as far as
Actually,
production than anybody.
we just had an IBEX seminar where we participated, actually Nick participated with me, where they analyzed a boat in front of everybody. You know, they hadn't seen our project, and they actually analyzed it right on the floor. And, you know, all of this stuff is done differently now, and you can analyze the loads on a structure a lot more than you used to, but it's just a normal progression. It's not, you know, the one thing you learn in engineering is that engineering is valid at the time it's done. And you can't go back and second guess what people did then, because they didn't have the tools you have now. And so if you think of it as, like, say you built a bridge 100 years ago and it fails, and they go back and they say, well, it was just badly engineered. The standard they compare it to is where was engineering 100 years ago, not where's engineering now. And so, you know, as we get into this, yeah, it's progressed, but it's been 40 or 50 years. If it didn't, there would be something wrong. So, you know, this is what I was trying to hedge out earlier. There's nothing wrong with what took place during the time period you guys talked about, but it would be pretty strange if time hadn't marched on and computers are used to analyze everything now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so now, of course, we can do a more finite job. We can get in and identify things a lot more precisely. But back then, that was the way it was done, and that was as good as anybody could do back then. And it's changed even during my career. It's changed so much. And now we're into a part of it where, you know, you're doing finite element analysis, you're doing large amplitude motion studies, you're doing computational fluid dynamics. And believe me, I didn't have the math to do this stuff. It's beyond me, but you realize where you have to go and how you have to analyze it. So,
I might want to say something about that. Don't trust it too much.
oh yeah.
And that's,
Well-
and that's a little bit of a problem. I'm working on some engine stuff, and we had Ohio State working on some stuff, and they came back with this Modelica program, and it's so far off, it's not even funny.
Well, it's
And
what I
because we're
always
based
call.
on experience, you know.
It's what I always call the test of reasonableness.
Yeah.
Is if the answer comes back half of what you thought it should be, then something's wrong.
Well, you got
I'm a-
experience. You
yeah,
got these
I'm a
young fellas
believer
that don't
You
have it.
go in knowing the answer, and all of the engineering is to back up your answer.
Where did
It's
they
not gonna be
have?
that
Yeah.
hard.
Your example of old-time engineering versus modern engineering, when they had the earthquake in California and the Nimitz freeway collapsed and cost all those cars, they refused to allow lawsuits against the company that built it and the people that designed it, because it was as good as you could do back then.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I gotta tell you an interesting story about engineering. I have always tried to get as much data and backup data so that when you go to make something, the next time you do it, you avoid the errors. So I always tried to do the numbers. And then I started doing a bunch of work for Glastron. And I was out there, and they had this little boat they were building. I looked at this thing, I says, they're getting ready to test it. I says, my God, that sucker is thin. I says, aren't you afraid that boat's gonna break? He said, yeah, we know it is. I mean, this is from their engineer, you know. That was, you know what they did? They took this thing out, they ran it, it cracked. They put a patch on it. They ran it again, for another place, put a patch on it. And they kept doing it, and pretty soon the boat wouldn't break anymore. They went back to their production line, and they built the boat with all these little patches in it.
Hey, where'd
Duh.
they have the IBAC show?
You know?
I'm sorry?
Where'd they have the IBAC show?
Tampa this year.
Oh, crap. I always went to it, and I
It
stopped getting.
it was actually pretty good,
Yeah.
pretty good turnout.
Oh, incidentally, they're fixing to have a resin show, strictly resin. All, yeah, all the composite show is gonna be in Orlando.
Right, actually, the guy that we gave the seminar with is gonna be participating in that. This
Yeah.
is Gurrit. High Modulus was bought by Gurrit. Gurrit also bought SP Systems, and so it's now, for your composites, you know, you're gonna basically use their materials, their engineering when you get to a certain level. But, you know, I've always looked at composites as kind of a 1 through 10 thing, where you take bucket and brush way down here. You take autoclave, aerospace composites here. Most of the boat business is a lot closer to below the middle to the
Bottom
bottom.
than it is.
But in some of the race boat stuff, we've gone basically to the top, but it's so expensive. You have almost no market for it.
The autoclave's the way to go if you got the money, but I don't know if anybody's doing it today.
There's a few, but again, parts this size, parts this size in the outfit, really hard to do. We had a real interesting boat that actually, I consider in the career of race boats that I did, probably to be the most important boat we did, and yet most people would have judged it as a complete failure. And that was the first offshore catamaran built in an autoclave. And the boat lasted 2 seasons and then hit a wave off of Spain and broke in half. And it set Advanced Composites back probably 5 years. And what people didn't realize was the boat was too wide to put in the autoclave. So it was built in 2 halves. And they stacked the material, pulled vacuum on it, closed it up, lost vacuum on the thing, pulled it out, threw it away. Laid it up again, stuck it back in, and you throw away those thousands of dollars worth of material, right?
Yeah.
And so then they loaded it back up, put it in again, lost vacuum again, not quite as bad, decided they couldn't throw it away twice, and kept it. The other half of the boat was done in a all vacuum bag, but not in the autoclave. And then the 2 halves were joined together. It was the side in the autoclave where they had lost vacuum that failed. But of course, everybody looks at it and says, carbon fiber, advanced composites isn't worth crap. And the backstory, which of course you guys all know your backstories, nobody understood that it was actually a construction failure. It was not a structural failure. But it set everybody back about 5 years because nobody wanted to really understand the story.
Have you heard anything of Parabeam?
Parabeam? Yeah.
It had a foam core and it was
No, there's
woven together like that?
no core whatsoever in it.
Oh,
It's
okay.
like if you picked up a piece of cardboard, and you looked through the holes to it. Okay, well, instead of being a little loop on the a little loop on it, Parabeam is absolutely square.
Okay.
Okay, so you got a sheet, you got the verticals in between it, and when you figure out how to use it, then you've got one hell of a strong thing. Our normal cowlings weigh 36 pounds. We now have one that weighs 18 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah.
And this Parabeam is from Norway. And there ain't many people figured out how to use it yet. Our little dummy companies figured out how to use it. We're making all our cowlings out of it.
The other thing that happened in offshore is, went from the deep Vs, and of course it was deep Vs and cats, and then it became almost primarily catamarans. But the materials went from wood to aluminum to composites and advanced composites. But about 10 or 15 years ago, the UAM rules changed to where you couldn't build a boat below a certain weight. And the whole composites game ended right there. You could build a boat with lesser, lower grade materials and lower grade techniques and make that weight. There was no incentive. There was actually, it was basically against the rules to keep taking that weight out. And we had been working at Tenkara in Italy, and the engineer we had was a guy named Luca Olivari, who is the best composites engineer I've ever met in my life. Lives up in the hills of Milan, rides a bike every day, a real free spirit, but he solved some composites problems for aerospace and for fast trains and stuff around the world. But he was doing all the composite work for the America's Cup boats that they were doing out of Tenkara, and we ended up getting him for our race boat stuff. But once they passed that rule that the boat can't be below a certain weight, that game ended. And shortly after that, I stopped designing race boats because it wasn't much fun for me if there was no advantage. That was half of the game. Half of the game was hull design, half of the game was structure.
Well, is
And
that
so you
whole
took
deck
that
and
part away.
stringer? That
Sorry?
whole deck and stringer weight or complete finished with the engines in?
Oh, it was the total boat, including fuel. And so there
And
was,
drivers.
and so we could beat that weight by, say 500 to even 1,000 kilos but you'd have to then ballast the boat back up to that weight. So why spend, who's gonna spend an extra $250,000 or $500,000 getting all that weight out of there only to have to bring it back up to weight again? So that game stopped. That game all stopped about, like you said, 10 or 15 years ago.
Well, as the speeds go up in these cats, the loads go up exponentially.
Oh.
It's fucking amazing. Well, I had the best job in the world at Magnum. We traveled all the time and just had a wonderful life. And Cougar talked me into being president of their company over there. And the first thing we did when they came over was take 7 plywood catamarans to Key West. We sunk 11. We get them up and fix them and sink them again.
Yeah.
I said, boy, it's kind of a rough start.
What a learning
boys."
curve. That's a learning curve.
Oh, shit. Never forget that.
Yeah, right when you started doing that was right when I was kind of starting, and
Yeah.
I remember getting advice from Brownie back in those days.
Well,
Right when that shop started.
when you build a different boat, every time you have another lesson that you have to learn somewhere. We built that 3-engine 46-foot V-bottom for Morales, which was, in those days was the fastest V-bottom in the ocean at least. And I built it upside down, and I didn't realize, although I had the drawing in front of me, I didn't realize how thin the cross-section of the transom was. When we turned the thing over and built the superstructure for the engine room and all that stuff on top of it, we ended up skinning with basically one sheet of aluminum, came from a roll, and we skinned the hull side and riveted on with 7 different kinds of rivets, which is interesting in itself. And then we skinned the side of the top sides up there, and it was as large as the bottom side. And we put 1,400 rivets in that boat in 3 races in Key West. He won the world championship in it, but we were fucking riveting all night, every night. Amazing. So many lessons.
We don't want to know about your personal life.
Yeah. I missed a lot of riveting because I was really riveting.
But years later, we were doing the aluminum catamarans with Couve over in Italy.
Oh, they were much better riveters than us.
And the decks were 2mm 5000 series aluminum riveted on. And we were in Trieste, and this wedding party comes by with like 25 people and wanted to have their photograph on the deck of the boat. So the boat's sitting in the water, and all 25 people crawl on the deck of this thing.
Oh, my God.
Oh, wow.
Well, we changed the decks to 1mm aircraft after that. Well, we realized that deck could hold 25 people.
Yeah. It was overbuilt, huh?
And
You passed the stomp
then went
test.
to aircraft raise, we went all the way down to 1mm.
You passed the stomp test
Yeah,
again,
exactly.
Yeah.
We got fairly sophisticated on the
Yeah.
aluminum boats. We used 3 different material thicknesses on the bottom and 7 different kinds of rivets and 3 different thicknesses of aluminum skin and stuff. And they held together for a couple of seasons, which was our goal.
The one thing that was pretty good about fiberglass and even better about wood is the bottom staying straight. You know, some people don't address that
Oh, the wood
very
is
much,
nice.
but keeping it straight. Aluminum would have a tendency, it's malleable and dense.
Right.
Fiberglass was a little more flexible, but sometimes it would warp, you know, because it's a plastic.
Yeah.
But making a boat straight, you know, I'll say one thing about Reggie as a manufactured boat. When I was up there, he used to take his boats, he'd run them down, they had to hit a spec, and before they even went out, his fast boats were always went into the straightening room where they straightened the bottoms out. And that is so, so important. I mean, that's the difference between winning and losing. I'm sure Sammy will say that, but I'm sure that they straighten the bottoms on the race boat. You did that too, didn't you,
Oh,
Brown?
sure.
But people discount that. They don't realize it's water, but it's got to be dead nuts.
Yeah, they blueprint the bottoms, yeah, they bring
Yeah.
them to me. a lot.
Now they call it blueprinting the bottom, you know, but I
Is that-
mean,
you're talking
this went back
aluminum?
to the wooden race boats. I mean, you know, they were straight, you know.
You're talking about aluminum boats?
Doesn't matter what it is, if the bottom of that thing is not straight, it will not run. Everything, like even the surface finish that Sammy was talking about, sanding it. What happens is it's not so much the roughness, it's just if you got a wave like that, you build a frontal area on every one.
Yeah.
You're building a high pressure and a low pressure
How do
area,
you,
and it just
how
sucks
do
it
you
right down.
straighten that on a composite boat?
Turn them upside down and you sand, big straight.
Sand them, putty
File
them,
what's
big
your hand,
straight.
fill
Like an
Yeah.
angle iron or something that's machined straight, and you have sandpaper on it. When you can't get cigarette paper under it, you're getting close.
But they weren't built like that in the first place?
Well, they come out of the mold, they don't come out straight.
Well, you
Or
straighten them
depending-
and then run them and then,
No, you straighten them,
Straighten
and
them
with they're
again?
right, you'll know the difference right off the bat.
Yeah.
I mean, the boat
You either
runs.
have
Take
Roger or
take a
hook.
2x4,
Yeah.
straighten it,
yeah.
Yeah.
put some sandpaper on it, and if it's in a sling,
There was an old guy at Keycape, I can't remember his name right now. And back when you had the power cats, Stan told me about him, that he hooked the old power cat to the back of his car on a rope and drug it around the parking
Yep.
lot to straighten the bottom out.
Yep.
Who was that? He was a little rough, but he was
yeah,
tough.
I know exactly.
You know who
what
I'm
you're
talking about,
Yep.
right? To straighten the
Yeah.
bottom out, they drug it around the parking lot behind the car to straighten the
Hey,
flat bottom.
I gotta tell you guys a
Yeah.
funny one. We were building these boats at Tenkara, and they were one-off construction, plywood molds, and we were building them without the strakes. Because, for composites, you really want everything to run nice and smooth, and you don't wanna go down into the strakes, and building a one-off mold is tough to put the strakes in. And so, in the beginning, all the strakes were wood. And, on top, here you got this carbon boat, but you got wood strakes on it. Well, they'd be running in a race and they hit something, and once that strake started to go, the whole fucking thing would come off, And so it's
I
like,
did that- I did
all
that.
10 feet of it's gonna come
Yeah,
off
right.
this
I
thing.
did that with Sadowski's boat.
And
the
it's,
Revenge.
well, that's how Sadowski's had the wood strakes. So anyhow, the guys over at Tenkara came up with making a mold and pouring it full of syntactic putty. So this is like, the powder mixed with, like microballoons mixed with epoxy. And so these things were kind of flexible, and you could go up to them, and you could like stick your fingernail in them like a padded dash almost. But they'd stay straight as can be, and if you hit something out of the water, take a chunk out like the size of a quarter, and the rest of it would stay. Well, we did this boat for Norberto Ferretti, and this boat had a little lope to it. And I swear to this day, you asked Norberto about it, he said, it's bouncing on the rubber ball, just like the rubber ball, it's because the strakes are rubber. And he was
Strakes are rubber.
completely convinced that the boat had a porpoise because the strakes were made out of this spongy material. So that's the guy leading a major boat company.
Like Odell said about the Italian boat when it come over here, the one he sunk. He said when you get it out in the heavy weather, it goes whop, whop. He said, and you get it in a little flat water, he goes, giddy, 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 giddy.
Of course, Odell's half Italian, so you
Yeah,
can get away with
yeah. We weren't as politically correct in those days.
How about the development of transoms and cores, wood, dealing with, transoms that carry all those loads?
You're building real thick transom now, aren't you, in the race boats?
Oh, gosh. When we were doing the aluminum transoms, we actually saw that everybody was having a lot of trouble with the aluminum transoms on the catamarans. But, of course, the cat works a little different than the V-bottom does, as far as the loads. But what we started doing was we started actually going real thin on the transoms, but we would put a framing system that almost mirrored all of the thrust points of the drive. And we would then put gussets in the longitudinals and basically take the framework and push the whole boat with it, as opposed to trying to push with a piece of plate.
Yeah.
As far as,
What about composite?
on the composites,
They use a lot of man.
they're
man
fairly
figs.
thick, but these boats have so much
Yeah.
carbon in them that you're not gonna bend the transom that's a couple inches thick with
Do
carbon
you
on either
use
side.
foam or something else?
Oh, well, there's foam, but it's like a H200. It's that
How many
really,
pounds?
really,
I guess
well,
that's it.
H200, it's like,
25, 30 pounds.
yeah, I mean, it's basically the density of a soft wood.
Tremento's 28, or was. I don't know.
Yeah, well,
I
but this
haven't done
would be like a wood that was, say, a 25 pound per cubic foot wood, so it's say mahogany's 30 pounds.
Yeah.
So it's, good dense material.
I remember one time when I was over at TNT, Johnny and Mike's, and they had the first Bud Light boat. I think it was a 50, well, one of the first Mystics, I think it was, a 50 or something like that. They had a transom cut out, and it was about that thick, maybe 3 inches thick, and Mike threw it to me, and I went to catch it, and it just like flew up in the air. I mean, it was light, unbelievable, but it was that thick, and they said to cut it with a hole saw and everything else was just impossible almost.
Well, most of the damn transoms that we did, Carl Keyhaver told us what the human mercury said, how thick it was supposed to be to
Yeah.
put all our pieces together in the back with the stern drive. And then we built like, well, that 32 had a round transom, and we cut I think a 13-degree transom on it or whatever it was. Made that out of plywood and the rest of it out of balsa.
The old days, everything was plywood.
But everything was just,
Transom
back
was-
then,
Yeah.
Carl said it had to be that thick and use 30, wasn't it a 13-degree angle we did on all the
Yeah.
transoms?
Yeah.
14 toward the end.
Yeah, but, I mean, it was just, everybody's was about the same.
Yeah.
Wasn't much difference in transom.
But like Eddie was saying, that the newer stuff that he's using for replacement transoms, and when I was building Monza boats and stuff like that, we came up with the Mantex transoms, Akusa and stuff like that. But the Mantex, I remember the first one I put together with composites, I think we put a 1/2-inch bolt in it just to test it, big washers on it and everything else. Snapped the bolt and it didn't even dent the transom,
No,
so
that's good.
pretty tough stuff.
Hmm.
And that was, after we had so many issues with dry rot in the transoms and stringers and stuff like that.
I tell you, what's harder on the transoms than these race engines is the outboards. The big multi outboard.
Monsters, yeah.
Yeah.
You put 4 of those on a transom and I mean,
Yeah, well,
With the number
they went-
sevens.
They went through some progression on
oh,
that too.
yeah.
No, boy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Busted
that's when
transoms
they went
out.
back to wood, not
Yeah.
so much
Yeah.
core anymore.
I think
The
the
outboard
transoms,
boats.
the transoms on the Invincibles with the 4 inches are like 4 inches thick.
Yeah, it's like,
And wood,
same
solid-
thing with a midnight.
No, we're
No.
using like Penske board, the real high density
Yeah,
core.
yeah.
But
When I was a stainless marine, people want us to build a 5-engine bracket. The life's too fucking short.
Yeah.
How about hull deck joints?
The what?
Hull deck joints, mechanically fastened,
Fast boats, they
Chemically-
pass them inside and out with glass.
glassed on
Yeah.
both
Put a
sides.
joggle in the mold on the top and the bottom, and
Yeah.
put a biax, no straight stuff, all biax.
Yeah.
So all the strands are working.
Yep.
Is that your standard?
oh yeah.
Some of the production boats, they're just, I've seen some screw together with the gunnel molding and that's it. You take the gunnel molding off, the deck will come off. But those are production stuff.
Yeah.
But in the early years of racing,
We bonded them together. In fact, some of them we did where we had the deck and hull and we put it on, put a little bevel on the deck, masked the boat off, put a mat in there and then pulled it down and then screwed it together so it all came out like it was one laminate. In fact, it was in some areas in the boat you couldn't even get into, for anybody to bond it. So just, putting that laminate, a mat in there and it squeezed all out and just as it gelled, you can trim it right off. And
I
that
gotta
worked
tell you,
pretty well.
those old Bertrams are pretty good. I just
Yeah.
restored a little 20-foot Moppy this last year. And it's a matched hull to deck joint. It's not an
Yeah.
overlap.
Yeah.
And it's glassed all the way,
Yeah.
all the way around.
Yeah, we glassed all
They
of
built a
those.
great boat down there.
Yeah.
The 20 was a little bit different than the rest of them, but all the rest of them was shoebox the top.
Yeah.
And then we glassed it inside with a matte, woven mat. And then when we put on the trim on the outside, the shear molding, we ran that through with bolts.
Right.
Yeah.
But little, not, when I say.
A little
bolts,
number 8s or 10s, yeah.
No, they were like 1032s, I think,
Yeah.
that held it on. So we had a bolt and a nut in there. And then the bigger boats, what we did is when we did the shoebox the same way. But on the inside of the deck, we actually took aluminum and like 1/4-inch thick aluminum. That went all the way around the thing. And then we drill it and tap it and then thread it in there. That way you get because later after the, big boat like 38 or something, you can't get in there and behind all that shit.
Yeah.
If you want to change that piece of, we did it more for that, but boy, it strengthened the hell out of the deck when you put that.
I like 5200.
Yeah, that's good. That works.
Oh,
You
yeah.
can't get the deck off.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's-
pieces.
I don't think there's really been too many problems with deck to hold joints and people that know what they're doing, I think probably, some of those
Probably
decks that were
true.
just put on with the gunnel trim.
There was a lot of them pop rivet on that used to separate.
Yeah,
Yeah, we used to
yeah.
rivet the monsters back.
Yeah, you
Pop-
just,
look
they
at
just
that
pop them
monster
on
ring.
pop rivet.
Yeah, yeah.
Just rivet all the way
Yeah,
around.
I
We could
know.
tap wherever you could reach.
Yeah.
You know, where the rod holders would go, glass tied up, the rest was just riveted.
Yeah.
And then also the rub rail screws would help.
Yeah, we got a
But
little-
no matter how much things may have, moved forward, I'd say a good 80% of what you guys did is still standard. It's not, it didn't move to the point where none of that's valid anymore. It's still the basics of how you do it. There's just materials and stuff that we can use that we didn't have back then.
They're still
Didn't
putting
have
in,
back then.
they're still putting in construction wooden stringers, right?
Mhm.
Probably
Oh,
the same stuff we
yeah.
did 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen a lot of stuff really progressed in the last 40 years. I mean, pretty soon you put your heart and your soul into everything of doing all this research and development, and you know all this stuff, and you look and you see what's out there in the marketplace, and you know how much could be better and not even cost as much. And when we did all that hull development, I mean, Brown knows, he did so many graphs, I think he was getting blurry-eyed from doing hull graphs. I mean, you know what works and what doesn't, but
Yeah.
if we take the technology today, a C-ray with a drive, regular V drive or whatever they put in it, same horsepower to rate ratio, and they run 34 miles an hour. Today, with what we know, you can run 50 and ride better and not even need the trim tabs. But
Mhm.
that's all there. I mean, but one time when we did that particular hull right there, I sent it out to all the graphs and the charts and all that stuff, and out to the manufacturers. I probably sent out about 100, showed the graphs, the charts, even magazine articles and everything. You know how many replies I got out of 100? 0. And what the crap is this? Now, we did a bunch of them for Larson, but it was very difficult to get that into the marketplace. We had one little boat called the Senza. And the
Yeah.
Senza got Boat of the Year, got all kinds of little awards. Everybody wrote glowing articles about it. Johnny Backus, that was one of his favorite little boats because he did the testing on it, And it took a couple of years. They even stopped building the boat and went back to their regular boats. And then one of the engineers said, we really ought to do something with this. And they says, okay. And they took they had a 28-footer. I took their 28 and that we had done and designed a new hull under it. So they took it and they stretched it to 30 feet and put the new hull bottom under it. And they shipped it down to my marina there. And here comes their head salesman down. I hadn't met him before. And he said, I really don't want to be here. I don't want to change. I don't want all this new stuff and da-da-da-da-da. And he says, I got this damn boat. I had to come down here and go for a ride in. I says, well, here's the keys. Knock yourself out, The guy didn't come back. We were getting ready to call the Coast Guard. He came back in, and this guy was like he was, born again or something, I couldn't believe it, Well, this boat went from 44 miles an hour to 52 miles an hour and rode better. Everything the same. Bigger, heavier, everything. So we did a new little 28-footer for them. They put on a special show. They had a bunch of dealers come in. They put trim tabs on some, trim tabs on other. People said, what's the trim tabs for? Because it didn't lean into the wind, didn't do any of this business. And we started doing that boat, and we've done thousands of boats for them. Now, here's the kicker. After all of these years, and of course the marine industry took this big dive, they get new salespeople in. I go to the show, and half the boats are not the same hull design anymore, what we call the DDC. And one salesman says, well, we're going back to our roots.
Our roots, when we were stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know,
we
I
liked
mean,
it better.
Huh? They liked it
It was
better.
simpler. Life was
I could
simpler.
never understand it. I mean,
Yeah.
and here's the analogy that some people say. I says, well, wait a minute. With this here, with the same power, instead of running 34, you go 50. Well, we don't want to go that fast. They don't think that, well, gee, you could pull the throttle back and not use as much fuel,
No.
But that's what you deal with sometimes.
Oh,
And I
that's
just
just
see
very-
all this technology and all
Yeah.
these years, it's just like, Brown, Mike,
Well,
this,
it's
I
very-
said,
it's-
when we're gone, is
yeah.
the library gonna burn, all this
No,
stuff
it's-
is gone.
It's very frustrating, we encounter that all the time.
Yeah.
As recently as this year,
Mhm.
I had Intrepid come back and ask us to do a new boat with them. And, they've completely written us out of the history that we're the ones that introduced a step to them in the first place.
Yeah.
But when we said what we wanted to do,
Mhm.
the first thing they realized is that we were gonna offer them the same thing we did with Invincible, only, we could do the same bottom on the Intrepid. Well, they want something different. They don't care if it works.
Just
They
different.
want it different, and they will be damned if they're gonna tell anybody it's the same that's on the other competitor's
Yeah, right.
hull. So they don't care. They even admitted to me that the stuff with the little slices in the bottom actually made the boat worse. But to the consumer, they go, look what we just developed.
Yeah,
And everyone will deny that it actually made them go in reverse.
yeah.
And so it's a crazy,
Yeah.
it's a crazy group of people. And you get, just like you say, they want to go back to their roots. And it's like, every other industry is living on technology right now, except for the marine industry.
It's gone, it's gone backwards. It's gone backwards.
Well, that's only partly true. I think the biggest breakthrough probably ever done at one time is a goddamn 5-axis mill. And they built those boats. The dumbest guy in the world can build a good-looking boat.
That's
Might
the
not
trouble.
run, but I'll tell you
that's the
one
trouble
thing.
again, Brown. They're only making dumb guys. They're not teaching anybody to do anything.
At the boat shows, those boats are slick as a gut. You got no more roving print, you got no more straight lines, everything's curved, so it's strong. I mean, I'm really impressed with that, I really am.
How about the Sea Hunter? You could cut that thing in half and it still floats. Not like the Whaler.
I have a
still-
1965 Whaler, I'm not very
They
impressed
did it,
with that.
Whaler, hey, they
Was
did
that
that
a boat
at
show? It was
the
pretty
Dinner Key
impressive.
Boat Show.
Yeah.
Took a chainsaw and cut the frickin' boat in half, and one guy rode off and the other started the motor.
What a breakthrough that was.
Yeah.
You know what I think's
Just in case
interesting,
Jaws comes at you.
we look at fiberglass and we think, well, it's relatively new. And you know what year it was developed? 1866. John Wesley Hyatt developed, he was looking for a replacement to ivory billiard balls. And then in 1880, a guy owned a pop bottle company, and the mold got a little tiny hole in it, and a piece of resin comes squirting out. The cloth comes, a piece of glass comes squirting out. And his neighbor just happened to be standing there and seen it and played with it. He says, he had a weaving company. He went off and made the first piece of fiberglass cloth.
Unfortunately, they didn't
And
do
they-
resin for another 100 years.
And, well, they showed it, they showed it,
Johnny Resin was born.
no, they showed that
Vulcanized.
in 1890 Canadian Expos, and with John Wesley Hyatt developing the first resin, and which turned into Bakelite later, and everything set still. And for the 1890 Canadian Expos, they did they did a hat, a pocketbook, a lampshade, and some cloth, which they hung in opera houses because they were burning down. And then to 1936, Owens Corning was formed. They were looking for something with a face-simple lattice structure that they could put radar waves through, and that's when they made the first radome.
I'll be darned.
But you figure, that long ago,
Well, we were talking about step hulls before.
Oh.
Reverend
century.
Ramus did the first planing hull ever, was a stepped hull in 1890.
most of them didn't have power enough to push the damn
Well,
thing.
but see, that's what I was talking about with Sonny Levy's work. You look at that stuff and say, if at that time in history, they had the rest of the ingredients, because the hull design's great, but if you don't have the rest of it to go with it, lightweight construction, lightweight high horsepower engines, drive systems that can handle it, but where we are now, it's like a perfect storm where you can put it all together. And it's been that way, over the last 20 or 30 years.
That's
But
true of airplanes, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, yeah, it's got to evolve, and so it's different at that stage of development because you don't have all of those ingredients there, and you think, well, what could everybody have done in 1959 with a deep V if they had all this other stuff? And that other stuff, came with time.
Harry and I have been working on this steam engine for the last 7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
And the one thing that we have finally totally discovered and agreed on is that we have the utmost respect for the guys who did it back in 1890.
Oh, boy.
Because they didn't have shit.
They had cast
They had
iron.
to cast
Yeah.
every
And it
part,
rust.
machine every part. Absolutely amazing. We're having a hard time with it with all modern technology. I don't know what the hell they did.
Hey, Brownie, if you ever go through a little chicken ship town in LaBelle where we live, there's a bridge there. Go right next to the bridge, there's a little, about 5 docks you can dock for free. There is a steam engine in there out of J.P. Morgan's boat, bolted to the dock.
Is that right?
How tightly is it bolted?
Yeah, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
it's got like valve covers,
Yeah.
sort of 3 different sizes. I don't know what the hell's in it.
Sammy, you get a kick out of it. During World War II, my dad worked at the wind tunnel at Moffett Field for NECA, and he was one of the many, many people. The P-51 Mustang went from a concept to flying in 60 days.
Yeah, that's fabulous.
Yeah.
Concept to flying.
But look at how they built all the B-52s too. They were
Yeah.
turning those things out.
Now they have to do it on a computer program and it takes longer. You know, it's just like you're talking about, you lose these skills. There's people that really knew how to build stuff. I grew up, and so did Sammy, building boats, wooden boats. One of the last plugs I built was a 50-footer. I went over to England to build it. I had a plane ticket over and back in 2 weeks, built the hull in 2 weeks with
Yeah.
2 friends of mine over there. So I'll
Wow.
show you the pictures of the boat. Nowadays, it takes them that long to do the drawing, you know, but it's computer generated.
You know, one of the greatest people that I've ever worked with was Marcel Riveau.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
He's a
Yeah.
boat builder, a real
Marcel-
boat builder.
Marcel Riveau,
Yeah.
I was a kid living in a marina in Siesta Key in Sarasota, Florida, right down from the test base. And this little guy was building these most magnificent boats you ever saw in your life, with the wood, the detail of the
Service
woods, and
runabouts.
Yeah.
the different woods and stuff like this. So as a kid, I think I was 12, 13 years old or something like that. I used to sand. He used to say, "Hey, come on, kid, you know, you sand, you know, you do this, you do this." And he was such a craftsman with the way he built the boat and the way he finished it and everything else. So I got to know him and his wife and everything else. And he taught me about cupping props. Well, I'll never forget it as long as I live. He says, you know, I had a little runabout, you know, a little utility with a 30 horse on it, or Mark 20, something like that. And I was having a hard time getting it on plane and stuff like this. He says, bring me the propeller. So I brought him the propeller, and he starts working it, you know. I said, what are you doing? He says, I'm putting cup in. I said, what the hell is that? And he goes, well, take your hand and cup it, and when you're swimming, go like this instead of going like this. And it made all the sense in the world. So, you know, I learned cup props from him.
Do you remember John McCall?
Sure.
Oh,
Riveau was John's
Yeah,
hero
exactly.
too. Yeah.
But-
He had taught John how to build
Yeah,
boats.
but listen to this. So I was 13 years old. So I'm over in Europe racing. I'm in France, this little harbor, and I forget the name of it. But we were prepping for the race and stuff, and I was up in, you know, in the boat on top of the semi and stuff like this. And I look down in the basin, and I see a little Riveau with these 2 little old people in it. And I go, what would be the chance in a million years that would be Marcel and his wife?
Wow.
I walked down, and it was unbelievable.
My goodness.
Oh, wow.
Unbelievable that I saw him, and he was kind of responsible for, you know, my learning of boat racing and stuff like that. And he used to let me run, you know, the little utilities that he built and stuff like this, and it was just an incredible story.
He built some great race boats.
Yeah, yeah.
old John McCall was probably one of the best wood butchers I ever found.
Yeah, but he learned from Marcel.
I kept John McCall. See, that was the one phone number I would not lose when I was running that Cougar Cat. Boy, if I'd tear it up, he'd be over there. And I mean, he'd bring that girl with him. What the hell was that girl's name that he had?
I don't know.
Alice or something like that. All he'd do is say, "Hey, Alice, show us your tits." I enjoyed having him around.
I've been in Sarasota for 2 or 3 years, and I'd gotten, you know, I wasn't going to build the boats anymore. I was going to just design them. And I called up John. I'd found out who he was, and I called up John. And went over and drove over there in a half an hour and arranged for him to build the boats. And he built 2 or 3 or 4 of the wooden boats. And I find out, after 2 or 3 years, that when I phoned him up, his price per hour was like $13 an hour. And when I got there, in the half an hour between when I left and when I got there, he took a Sharpie and changed the 3 into an 8.
John was all right though. John was the one that built that, what's that, rocket signers? We had to build all the, Von Braun or whatever his name. He designed the boat for Keycafer, and John Mccall went up to Lake X and built it.
Yeah, but didn't Mccall build the one for Billy Ellsworth? That
No,
Caldwell, wasn't it?
That was
Caldwell.
Caldwell.
Yeah, that was Caldwell.
Looked like a telephone. man.
Yeah.
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 It didn't run
that
very
son of a
well.
bitch
They almost
is
got
finally
He ended
dead.
up getting a screw in his knee when that
Yeah,
thing blew up.
almost got-
he's finally dead.
Yeah.
He had some dumbass deal. He was gonna.
Thank God. Thank God.
He was
finally
gonna
got.
lay
No,
on
no,
a frickin' surfboard and let him run over him with that frickin' catamaran. You talk about stupid.
You got your stupid.
Yeah, Caldwell was an
But that
interesting
thing, I
guy.
remember they brought it to the lake and the tunnel was like, you could, if the sponsons were on the ground, you could walk under them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it was the
That boat
stupidest thing.
never did anything.
No, they blew it up.
Big black piece
Yeah,
of
almost-
shit.
They ran
almost
out,
killed
ran
him.
out to Port Everglades and they made it about 50 yards.
Big splash.
About wowie.
I've blown a lot of tunnels out in my life.
Garwood's catamaran sunk up
Yeah.
off Palm Beach.
I mean, the Venturi.
The big
Yeah,
one.
there's a lot.
My dad and Troy, and I was a little kid in that same boat that I was telling you about that my dad built.
Yep.
We drove through the tunnel on the Venturi.
There you go.
Drove the boat through
Not
the
just
Venturi.
Caldwell.
I was going real slow, and the captain said,
I'm the
"Yeah, go
only,
ahead," and they
I'm the only
actually drove
living
through the
person that
Venturi.
raced against Garwood.
Yeah. Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Well, he had that boat that was built down at North.
The Orca.
Yeah, the Orca. Yeah.
That boat
He
wasn't
ran in the
very good.
1964 Bimini Handicap
That
race.
had Detroit.
Allison's.
No, yeah, some kind of. No, I mean the one that he had the Orca.
It
had some
a
kind
pair
of
of
diesel.
Allison 1710s in it.
I thought it had some kind of diesel.
Well,
That was a big piece
later
of
he
shit.
had that, but he had Allison's in the race.
Oh,
Didn't he have the diesel record at that time when he did that? Did that have the diesel
Not
record?
to my knowledge.
I don't know, but it didn't ever run very well.
Yeah.
No. I beat it with a formula.
It had one of those
Oh.
old, it had an old sport fisherman type hull, is what it was.
Are you doing push-ups?
Why don't you tell us about this?
Oh, okay, this is what Brown and I have been working on. The kind of the boat industry kind of left us, even though our hearts didn't leave the boat industry. But
Defibrillator.
it still runs on water.
It still runs on water.
It's lubricated with water. This is a valve in here. We've done a tremendous amount of experimentation on this stuff. You have no idea. 8 years without a paycheck is kind of tough. But this is the newest little one that we have. This will go up to about 6 horsepower, but whatever you feed it with is what it puts out until something breaks.
What is it?
I got the pictures of a race car.
steam
we have.
engine.
The
It's a steam engine.
three-piston radial steam
Yeah.
engine.
It's a modern steam engine. There's a guy by the name of Professor Stumpf many years ago who probably could have been building this today, but it was like you were talking about, Mike. They didn't have the materials at the time. They had cast iron, and they didn't have a lot of the carbons and ceramics and aluminums and stainless steels that we have today, and that's what allows it to be built. But we were able to do one of our small engines was tested by Raytheon, and we ran over 30% thermal efficiency with it. Little small engine, and of course your gas engines are around 25%. And we delivered a engine to TARDEC. TARDEC is Truck Army Tank Command this past year, and it was a 10 kW generator that occupied a 12 by 12 by 17 cube. That's the generator everything. And it took a lot of work to develop it, but there was a second phase because they needed it for the Stryker vehicle. And what happened is the sequestering stopped the second thing, and a week after we left TARDEC, they laid off 1,000 people. Now we did a couple of submarine engines for Raytheon, And the same situation happened. They were putting up a big dyno room and everything, and we were doing the project, and we got the first engine done, and the second one was close, and they said, end the project. But we ran the second engine, we got it running, and we boxed them up, and they never took them out of the crate.
Our submarine engines don't breathe air.
No. No, they'll go 1,000 feet, not like a torpedo now, they just go right down. Now, we have some new systems. I've been working with Jim Moden. He's a guy that developed, he's a chemical engineer that developed what we call the Moden fuel. And we can run that underwater. We also have plans for the Iron Man suit to drive that, because so far it's all they have to run the Iron Man suit is an extension cord. And we've got a little motor developed for that that's 3 inches in diameter, 13 inches long, and 2 containers of Moden fuel. Moden fuel is safe. You can hit it with a bullet, throw it on a bonfire, nothing happens. So that's ideal for that. Little small submarine engines, some drone stuff we're working on. And we're
How is the heat applied then?
You put steam in here, steam goes in here, and it goes through the rotary valve to the cylinder. You notice that's a pretty small line.
Mm-hmm.
It's because the velocities are so high. We operate at high temperatures and high pressures, and that was the problem with the early piston engines, why they went to turbines, because they could run the temperatures up. But turbines in small sizes are not at all efficient. I mean, you've got a lot of line losses going through, you know, that just blow off. This is a piston engine. This particular engine is a free piston engine. It has no rings, no connecting rods, no crankshaft, and it'll run on 1 cylinder. But the other ones have what we call a spider bearing on the inside. They're radial engines, and they run on the same plane because the spider bearing works like a gear as it goes around on the inside. I have some other stuff over there if anybody has any interest in it. But we think this is really the future. We have some.
What are the pistons connected to? There are no rods and crank. How do you?
Yeah, they float around on a ball bearing. I'll have to show it to you.
That's an eccentric ball bearing
Yeah,
on the crankshaft,
Yeah.
if you would.
Yeah.
And it pushes that away and the steam pushes this
Yeah.
away.
The key to doing a lot of this stuff is materials. Like I said, in the past, they weren't able to run these temperatures. They had to run oil through an engine, and basically a steam engine was not necessarily a clean engine because it used steam cylinder oil. And they injected it into the steam and everything, and it's blowing all kinds of crap out.
As opposed to buying something for that engine at the store, we made every single piece of that motor.
You make pumps, because there's no pumps available. We make blowers, fuel injectors, I mean, like everything. There's just nothing that you can buy. And and this is the simplest one. This one's in fact, this engine was designed in 2002, and it sat in a box, and we didn't have the right materials to make this work. And just a few months ago, I pulled it back down because we did.
And what kind of power would that generate?
It depends on what you push into it. It's rated at 6 horsepower.
And RPM?
It'll turn 5,000. So.
Is it loud?
Hmm?
Is it loud?
No, in fact, the big ones even run like an electric motor.
You
Really?
can't hear them running.
No,
Yeah.
they're very, very smooth. And like, this one doesn't have a throttle on it and stuff. This one will just run, and we've developed heat exchangers that are totally different than anything else. Most like you would see a boiler. We don't use a boiler. We use a heat exchanger. They're a bunch of small tubes. And old practice, they put a fire in the middle and run it out. We do exactly the opposite. We run the fire around the perimeter, and it's like a centrifuge. So the heavier particles keep staying to the outside wall where they burn, and then they can come in, and because heat, as it expands, it would cool. So we don't let it expand going out, we push it through the center of the centrifuge out to the exhaust in the center. See, and what it does is by having the coils and everything in a round circle, you get an airfoil effect that actually sucks it right in. And it works very well. We run these systems inside the building. And you don't smell them. And we have a forklift company we're building some test engines for because they really don't want to go to electrics. These are big forklifts. They would have to have a warehouse. They would have to have a warehouse with the, don't dance, Brown.
I was just ripping my clothes off.
They would have to have a warehouse with batteries, change them out 3 times a day, and batteries disposal is a real issue.
Yeah.
As far as the submersibles, the Navy doesn't like crap, what's those batteries? Forgot now.
Oh, the
Lithium ions,
lithium
because
ion.
they built a $500 million submarine and it burned up with the batteries. So the Navy stayed away from that. And the power density
Now,
is
do you
much better.
guys
with the motor
have
fuel.
an avenue towards?
And anyway, the forklift
submarine
industry's
stuff?
interested.
Yeah.
We're working on
Where
another
do you have the
company
contracts
that
for all
has
that?
buses. Because a bus idles 70% of the time.
Yeah.
And diesels give out most of their pollution at idle. They give off benzopyrene, which is a carcinogen, far worse than cigarettes by 100 times.
One of the markets that Harry's working on is, we haven't done it yet, but we're able to do it, is torpedoes, using modern fuel, which can be lit and shut off and lit again. We could build a torpedo that a nuclear submarine would fire and go lay on the bottom of the pond for a couple of years. You could call it up one day and say, go over and sink that boat over there. They could start back up and go do it.
But the big market is exploration, around oil rigs and all that, because there's a lot of offshore oiling, drilling going on, and that's what they need. They can't run these big extension cords down because it takes more power to pull it, especially when you get something down 1,000 feet, because they do that. They're drilling deep well drilling and stuff like that. So, with batteries, they just don't do the job. By the time they get down, they got to come up. Batteries have about, like fuel has about 100 pounds the power density as a battery does. Modern fuel is right about in the middle. You burn a lot of fuel, to get what you want, because it's the BTUs are, I think modern fuel is about 1,400 BTUs per pound, where you get 140,000 BTUs in diesel.
You're gonna become a wealthy man when this hits.
No, I'm an inventor. I don't give a shit. You don't get nothing. You piss it away doing these
You're
things.
supposed to get a good patent attorney and
Well,
protect
I've
your
got,
interests.
well, I think we have 25 patents in the marine industry and another 40 or something in this technology here, but.
Harry's gonna be sitting in a wheelchair slobbering.
Yeah, right.
A solid gold wheelchair, right?
Yeah. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't gamble, I don't do drugs.
No,
But you-
boring.
but you-
I invent stuff,
He's got a clear mind.
They don't think that's why I have to do this stupid stuff, so.
Everybody's got a vice.
Got a
Yeah.
trouble, that's right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an obsession sometimes, I guess. Of course, I enjoy working with Brownie. He's been with us a while. He's added quite a bit. We were having trouble with water, and the first thing he came up with is he was at the boat show, and I said, man, I'm having all kind of trouble. I'm using distilled water. And he says, why don't you use deionized water? Click, And that was the first contribution. And I says, you're coming with us. And that's what we've been doing is we use deionized water in it. And a high filtration system, because you try so many different, we use probably at least a half a dozen different alloys of stainless steels and nitronic 60 and different ceramics, silicon nitrides and a lot of carbons. Now, every element that you deal with has its own alloys, like fiberglass has its alloys. And the aluminums, you got 70-75 aluminum, if you want some strong pieces like the pistons, or the block is 60-63 or something like that for corrosive abilities, and stainlesses. Now, we don't have to use 316 in this because it doesn't have chlorides in the water or anything, so we use, but the others is nitronic 60 we use in some other tough stuff, cranks is 1775, 17.4 and stuff like that. But it's tested all these different kinds of materials. Like I said, the piston designs, I'll tell you what, I thought Mikey was going to kill me at the 25th drawing of the piston,
Yeah.
Mike is a young man that worked for me since he was 18 years old. He's 52 now. So I think
This
he's,
doesn't have the valve in the middle of the piston anymore.
no, we tried
That
so many
exit
types of valves.
Exit the
Well,
steam rotary
this
in
one
that
has ports.
little
It
housing.
exits into the middle of the engine.
The rotary in the top of it.
The
Yeah,
ports.
this is the newest valve. We started with experimenting with that 3 years ago. Actually, I did it in another little engine. We have one little tiny one we built. It's only 5 inches in diameter.
Well, how are you getting the steam?
Here.
No, out.
It's got ports on, like a two-stroke.
Oh, okay.
See,
but
then it
what
comes
I'm
out the
saying-
bottom. See this hole
Oh,
right
it comes
here?
out there, that
Yeah.
goes to the cooker.
This goes to back to the condenser.
Yeah.
Like a radiator would
Yeah.
be. But most of the condensing occurs in the block because we push water in here, mixes with the steam, does a lubrication, and dumps out. Now this one is a little bit very, very simple. The other ones are a lot more sophisticated than that when you look at the whole engine. Because the heat exchanger and the condenser and everything is all in one package. They put out a lot of power. That little 37 cubic inch engine puts out over 1,000 foot-pounds of torque. And she's 100 horsepower, a little over 100 horse. So. And you could pick up the engine and walk around with it.
We've got a steam land speed record car.
Yeah.
How's that coming?
Slowly.
Wait.
The car's slow or the
Harry
project's
said
slow?
Project slow.
When we have money, we work on it. When we don't have money, we don't work on it.
Yeah.
So how are you guys getting money these days?
Stealing
Investors?
I wish we could.
They robbed 2 frickin' banks last month.
Yeah, boy. I have some friends that had some faith in us, and we started a company, plus my money, Frankie's money. We're running out of that, so. Like I said, 8 years without a paycheck is.
Oh, it
this
starts to
project.
add up,
But
for sure.
The thing is, we have people out there that are saying, wow, this is the next Apple, because it drives anything. You can, diesel, sitting next to a diesel truck with all the black crap coming out and the engine sitting there loud and everything. What's the advantage if in a vehicle it stops when you stop? It doesn't need a transmission. The torque is so high. The torque curve is backwards from a gas engine goes like this. This one goes like this.
So to cool it, this is air cooled, you have liquid cooled, the bigger ones? Or?
In the submersibles would be liquid cools, of course, or boat engines. Now, I've got a little boat I built for Frankie that we were going to go use it to set the steamboat record with, but again, all of those projects take time and money, and we have to focus on the stuff that's going to bring us back money, like we did the Raytheon. Now, we bid another little engine very similar to this for a company over in Spain called Renovalia. And they had bought some Stirling engines on these big dishes, solar dishes, to generate 3 kilowatts. And they came over from Spain because their package didn't work, and they invested a tremendous amount of money. And they wanted us to do it, and I looked at their dish. I says, "My God!" I says, "The engine sat in front of the dish. Their engine weighed 25 pounds. 150 pounds for the engine alone. It was a big thing, and it blocked the sunlight." I says, "Why don't you do this?" And I sketched them up a dish, something very simple to do. And they said, "Yeah, we like it, but we already got 200 of these. Could we just put an engine on there?" So, oh, boy. So we developed an engine. We built 3, shipped them 2. It was to put out 5 horsepower. It was like 5.2. They were pleased. We were unpleased because they went broke and owed us $100,000. So, Spain went, everything at that time was just crumbling. So building something new, as innovative as this kind of stuff is, it's a little tough when the economy, the military, you're doing military work. Now, we were working with General Dynamics and Raytheon and Lockheed, all these companies, and they loved the project. But then pretty soon, the people that you're talking to doesn't work there anymore.
Right.
I gave Harry my saying. He said, "Oh shit, I'm sorry you said that." The pioneers got all the arrows.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
And that's absolutely the truth.
Boy, that was scary. Thinking you do all that work and, all that stuff, and then pretty soon, it'll be lost technology again. It's like, in the boat industry. I mean, you got a table here of people that have, just hundreds of years of experience. And this experience in this area is really something. I mean, coming from wooden boats and flathead engines into ocean racing boats, and to see what's coming out in the marketplace now, I still say it. It's backed up 20 years anyway.
It's
But
so frickin'
it's gone.
interesting doing that stuff. I work on materials a lot, and when you consider that the thing runs at, some of our engines run as high as 3,250 PSI and 1,250 degrees, the expansion and contraction of material versus material versus material is fucking amazing.
Is that is this run what they call superheated steam?
Oh, yeah.
Can't see it.
I know,
Yeah.
I went down the engine room one time on the Forrestal, and there's tubifores like this, clipped all the way around the engine room. I said, "What the hell you want them for? Y'all gonna have ball bat parties or something?" He said, "No, man." He says, "You can hear a steam leak, superheated, but you can't see it."
Yeah, right.
So everybody takes a tubifore,
Yeah.
and they go up and down all the way around, and they gradually move towards each other. And when the superheated steam hits the tubifore, it goes, cuts it right off.
Yeah, it'll put a
If you
piece of
get
wood on
your arm,
fire,
if
yeah.
you get your arm in the way of it,
Now, we've been very fortunate. We've had, in all the years we've been working, the only accident is Michael picked up a piece of hot metal, burned his hand, and that was it. I mean, we've been very fortunate. We try to be very careful with everything, but we run mostly diesel fuel or kerosene. Kerosene, I like to run kerosene, but it doesn't stink as bad as diesel. I'm not talking about running. I'm talking about even in the container you can smell diesel. But it runs on anything. We've run through our fuel injector. We've run powdered coal. gaseous fuels. In fact, I'm doing a heat exchanger for another company right now to run on a gaseous fuel. But this one is kind of my newest little favorite right here because of the simplicity. There's just not much to it. It'll run on one cylinder. You can take this engine and run it, not with steam, but if you run on compressed air, they'll run on compressed air. You can pull it apart while it's running. Take a piston out, take a cylinder out while it's still running. Put it back together too.
How are we
So it's
doing
kind of
with
fun.
with your,
Good.
Sorry you had to push my button
Oh,
on
that's
that.
all right. No, I wanted to hear. I just had a question for Charlie. Your
Yes.
dad isn't here.
Yes,
Can you?
and neither's Bobby Cicenti either, I guess.
Yeah.
So maybe you'll wanna
Can
hook
you-
up with them at some point.
Can you just tell me a little bit about your dad and what he
Oh, gosh.
might have contributed here?
You're probably better off talking to him, yourself, you know, that's what I would suggest.
Just give me a little background.
Gosh, his background is trucking. He had a large trucking business for many years, always loved boats. He met Aronell, I guess, in the mid-70s and purchased a 24-foot cigarette mold, which I believe you designed, right? The
Yeah,
24?
Little 20, it's 23, yeah.
Yeah.
Originally, yeah.
And,
No, you got the 24, the fat one.
we have
Oh.
we have the 8-foot wide one, I guess.
Oh, yeah, that one was about 7.5 feet, I think. It was
Seven, yeah, it's not
basically the
quite
28,
eight,
just
yeah.
about scaled down.
Yeah,
Wasn't wooden mold,
we
yeah.
still have that mold, actually.
Oh, okay.
Tried to build, Brownie sold us a couple brackets for that some years ago, and let's see, so also he did that, and then he raced with these guys in the late 70s. And then if you ever heard of a company called Sonic, which I guess was the original MSV, they Jean-Claude Simon shortened it, they took some strakes off, you know, all that, you know, how he did all that stuff. And that became what Sonic used, became their Sonic 38 after that. I'm trying to think what else. That's pretty much his boating, you know, boating thing. And then of course he's involved now with the historic thing, so he's got all the pictures and crap from
He got John Krause's
Krause
collection,
and
is that right?
Ron Thibodeau and all that. So you'll be looking for all those pictures, all the boats these guys were talking about today.
He's got another attribute too, he don't ever answer his telephone.
Yeah, he doesn't answer his telephone either. Yeah.
But he was a fierce competitor too. He was always one to be reckoned with.
Yep.
But didn't have quite all the advantages of PK-FER and all that kind of thing. So somebody mentioned, and the point's well said, that the desire to win, the desire to race, that kind of thing, he had a very strong desire to do that, and realized his dream, I guess, you know. at
How
that
long
point.
did he?
He only raced a couple of years, I guess 79 and 80. He raced the small boats in 76, 77, 78, and then with these guys in 79 and 80.
Well, you run races with cubic dollars.
Yeah.
Open the hatch and shovel it in.
This will also drive a golf cart.
I had a before we wrap up, maybe an idea that, and we've got cameras here, maybe everybody can ask the group a question, whatever's a question they might have. I don't know what it would be, but some unanswered question, or it could be anything, any question.
Why don't you start?
Well, I'll get there. Okay, and I'm not sure I have thought it through well, but so think of a question, and then maybe you guys can talk about the best time you had in this industry, whenever that might be.
Well, we've had some good times.
Yeah.
We can tell you the damn worst one, first Bahamas 500.
There's not enough time to go through all the stories that we could come up with, I'm sure.
Of course, if Brownie could tell us how he was always getting all them girls with their boobs hanging out all over the place. I often wonder, Bert, how did you talk these girls into standing around? He run a check boat one time, and my wife was the only person on the check boat that had any clothes on.
They're all in the helicopter.
Well, there's more to that. I built Magnum. I built 5 boats for Victor Borga. He and I were great friends. And Victor called me up in November, and he said, "Brownie, could you come get my boat in Greenwich, Connecticut, and bring it down to Miami?" He said, "I got a show down there, and I want to stay on the boat." I said, "God damn, it's kind of late in the year, Victor, but I'll do it." So I got Smitty and Tony Azara to go with me.
The wet look.
And we went up and picked that boat up, and we came down the North Atlantic in late November. Well, it was a bitch of a trip. We got down to Miami, and he stayed on the boat for a week. I said, "What are you gonna do with the boat?" He said, "You keep it until next summer." And he said, "I don't want you to let it sit. I want you to use it like it's yours and, keep it going and keep it repaired and send me the bill, no problem." I said, "Okay." So they called me up and said, "We're having a race out from Hollover to Government Cut. We want you to be the Government Cut check boat." So I take Victor's 53 Magnum and about 20, 30 people. And it's boring as shit. We're down to watch Gilmore race, and he's racing in the worst boat in the deal. He's running last. So we're pretty aggravated with all this stuff. And I said, "I have to stay here. We can't go. So we'll think of something to do." So my girlfriend was a semi-nudist at heart anyway. And so she said, "I'll tell you what, when we come by, we'll moon them." So several of the girls went out on the front of Victor Borges' boat and mooned Gilmore and Roy McCullough when they came by. The next time they come by, they moon us. So now we get more people out on the front deck, and we start mooning all the race boats because it seemed like a fun thing to do. So we got a load of people on the front deck mooning the race boats. The helicopter comes by and takes pictures of our people mooning the race boats. Then they moon us, and we moon them. Then a cruise ship comes by, and finally everybody's out there mooning. It was fabulous. We just had to be there.
You didn't do that, did you, Brownie? You didn't do any
That's
mooning.
good.
They did.
Brownie, you didn't do any mooning, did you?
I did.
Oh, crap.
I did.
I want to see that picture.
One of the girls on the boat was accustomed to using drugstore products, if you get my drift. And Victor's refrigerator had been full of beer and stuff, but we drank that up in no time. And somebody opened the door, and a box of sodium bicarbonate fell out, which you have in there for odor. And this big white pile of powder ends up on the deck. Patty said, "My God, my dream came true." I said, "No, sodium bicarbonate." But on the way back, we stopped at Pelican Harbor to drop everybody off, and we broke a lifter, $8,010. I'll never forget it. I said, "Victor broke your boat." He said, "I don't care. Get it fixed."
And I send my wife along with him for safety.
So let me ask you, who did the photo shoot of the Magnum with all the girls spread across the back in thongs?
Oh, that was over in Italy.
Was it?
Yeah.
That's spectacular.
Nice heinies.
That's spectacular. Still one of the best shots, boat shots around. I think it was like
Yeah.
8 of
Dandy.
them or 8 or 10 of them, all laid across the sun pad in the back,
Well, you know-
on their stomachs with.
Nudity is not out of place in the Mediterranean.
Say it again?
Not at all.
Oh, no, not at
Supposed
all.
to be. So did you guys
Central
talk
Park.
to Catherine lately?
I
Her son.
actually met with her 6 months ago.
The Ice Princess.
Went up into the office, and the office is exactly
The same way.
the same as the day you were there. Same sofas, the same stuff, and she's 70-something now.
Yeah. You know, we did the 80 with her.
Yeah. Well,
And,
I was part of that.
Yeah,
I
we.
don't know
Oh,
what
yeah.
came of it.
Yeah, I remember the
Well,
fights.
Well, what ended up happening was the guy that she had in the company to run everything and that project quit. And
Which
so,
one
you
of
know,
them?
you end
Is that
up.
Alberto?
That was
Fernando? How many people?
Barillas, Jim Barillas.
Oh.
But, you know, Jim just up and quit, you know, because he couldn't handle Catherine. And so we ended up not only having to design the boat, we had to take over everything else. And of course, there's no other money. It's just yours, right? And so this goes on for a year or so. And Catherine, I'm driving someplace, talking to her, and she says, "Oh, you know, you're so helpful, and you're so, you know, all this kind of stuff." And I said, "Well, Catherine," I said, "you got to understand, my favorite cartoon ever is the Gary Larson cartoon of the bears standing over looking at the campers." and say, these fangs, these claws, you think they're for eating honey? And I said, Catherine, you just never seen me lose my temper. You think I'm so nice. And so a couple days go by, and she gets the delivery of the 80-foot deck. And she doesn't like it. She doesn't like it. You know, she wants it all done over. Meanwhile, you've given her every drawing you could. You've given her every opportunity to see the deck you could. You know, and it's like, you don't like it. It's Pininfarina's design that we had to make work. And now you tell, well, I'm not going to pay you.
It doesn't look Italian
I was
enough.
there.
That's
I'm
something
not
she
going to
would
pay
say.
you.
I was on the
And so
80-foot project.
so this gets good, and I'm glad my wife's here because she can attest to this. So anyhow, I'm listening to her, and I just told her the story about, you know, the bears looking at the campers. You've never seen me when I lost my temper. Well, she's a woman, so I'm treating her completely different. And we're starting to argue, and I just hung up on her. That was the most expensive hang-up I've ever had. And so then what happened, it cost me $30,000 to hang up the phone. And so then she starts having her guys call me and, you know, Michael, you know, she hurt her feelings when you hung up the phone on her. You know, you shouldn't have done that. It's like all this. And, you know, she kind of thinks you should send her flowers. You know, she thinks you should court her. So I go home and I tell my wife, I said, yeah, Catherine, you know, like I get the word she wants me to send her flowers. And Cherie says, fuck her, we don't need the money.
I gotta tell you my Catherine story.
That's what company you're with.
They hired me to build the 53 over in the Thunderbird houseboat plant where they laid it up. And I'm working over there with one guy and a pair of pliers and a screwdriver practically. I mean, there was nothing there to use. But they had a deadline on getting the boat together, and I had a little bonus if I got it together in time. So we're working night and day and really hitting it a lick. And I'd never built anything that big. I did the 49 carries, but they were small compared to the 53 Magnum. And I built a spine for the deck because the deck was so big and floppy, you know, with 6-inch flanges on it. It was 17 feet wide and 59 feet long. And we had to pick it up with 2 hoists and put it on the boat. So we put it on the boat with a spine under it, but the boat's bulkheaded. So I said, get your goddamn skill saw. I said, cut one here, cut one there. We go through the whole thing. We drop the deck on it. Catherine comes in and says, who told you where to cut that hole in that bulkhead? I said, well, I assumed the hole would be somewhere in the neighborhood of the fucking walkway. I said, but we can fill it up if you don't want it there. It's no problem. There's a hole in each one of these because we got to get this spine out of the boat. She said, I don't think you're doing this right. I said, Catherine, I got a deal for you. She said, what's that? I said, you come build this boat and I'll stop by every morning and break your balls. She said, I'm not breaking your balls. And she never came back. The last trip to that job.
Was that the A copy boat?
But you know,
Was that
she
for
went
A
to
copy?
build this 80.
Say again?
Was that for A copy? Was that the A copy boat? The Magnum?
No,
for the
it was,
guy that- I thought that was the first 53.
Just
was,
keep making.
where the hell did it go?
Okay.
3 was Sergio Beanie's, 2 was Capriles, 1 was, maybe it was. Maybe it
Herb
was.
Chambers, right? Chambers. Herb Chambers?
I don't
Yeah.
remember.
I just
I wasn't
remember
that in the business.
because we went, I went out on it when it was in Newport, when it was first delivered.
I think
Mccall,
he
yeah.
was later in
He was
the-
later
I still
on
got
than
a
that,
2-hour
yeah.
drive.
I remember the name Herb
Yeah,
Chambers,
yeah.
because he always bought other
Where's
Magnums.
LaBelle.
Well, I'll ask my question. In this whole conversation, nobody ever mentioned Jim Winn. Where did he fit in the whole thing?
He belonged in the hole.
He took credit for a lot of good stuff
That Walters did.
Yeah.
that Charlie Strang
And
did.
Charlie Strang did with the drive.
Charles, and also don't forget Sam Sarah.
Who?
Sam
Sam
Sarah.
Sarah.
Oh, Sam.
Winn took all the credit for the turbine boat, and he didn't really do anything to it. The only thing he did to it is bust Tommy Mottola and I's balls one night because the propeller wasn't, the shaft wasn't exactly, he didn't like the way it felt when we were running it at the dock.
Jim,
He took
Jim
credit
was an opportunist, and God, he was good at it. I'll give him that. I think He told me once he made $19 million off of the Volvo patents.
Wow.
And-
All I can tell you,
and
don't
Charlie
ever-
invented that whole goddamn thing.
And Charlie told him to do
refused
it.
to take a dime
Charlie
from
told
it
him to do
because
it,
he's a
too.
moral person. When he was at Mercury and he wouldn't, he just wouldn't do that. That's the way he is.
Don't ever mention Carl Kiekhaefer and Jimmy Winn in the same line,
But you know that
because
Jim Winn.
Carl would come out of his grave to get you in shelter.
But you know, Jim Winn actually warned the guys working for him. Come on, what's the designer's name he used to work with? Well, you had Fred Hudson, and you had the other guy used to work in Intrepid,
John Michelle.
Larson, Bob
Oh,
Larson.
yeah, Bob Larson.
Yeah.
He right when Jim Winn knew his days were coming to an end, he told both of his guys, you know, when I die, some things are going to come out.
He was right.
Yeah, but
I
I mean,
went to his funeral.
they kept that whole thing about the drive quiet. all
Well, he
through
didn't
that.
have to die, we knew that before he died.
Sonny Levy and I went to his funeral.
Did you really?
Yeah. And they had a party afterwards at Skip Allen's house on Sunset Island #2.
Yeah, is Sonny Levy still living?
Yeah, he's sailing the Malacca Straits.
Who's
He
that?
was in Phuket when the seism hit over there.
Really?
Yeah, but he had just taken his sailboat around the backside of the island to get the bottom painted, or he'd be a dead sucker.
How old do you figure he is these days?
We just did a two-part
Crap, I'm gonna be
story
80
on
next
him,
June. I guess he must
about a
be
year ago.
90.
90. I saw him about 20 years ago at his house.
His granddaughter races.
We were on the Isle of Wight.
Really?
Yeah, really, really nice experience with him. We
He's a
called
nice
him.
man.
We called him and asked if we'd come up and see him. We took a taxi up there, and then as we were getting ready to leave, he says, "You know what? We'll drive you down to town. We'll drive you down." And so he and his wife brought us down, and left us off. And about 5 minutes later, his wife comes running after us and says, "Why don't you guys join us for lunch?" So we get back in with them, and we go over to the yacht club in Taos. And we go walking
Oh,
up
yacht
the
club.
stairs to the yacht club, and there's three guys standing up there, and one of them's the Commodore of the yacht club. And he says, "Excuse me, gentlemen, you know, it's a private club." And Levy says, "Well, I'm a member." "Well, sir, I'm sorry, but you know, if you're a member, you know, who are you?" "Well, I'm Sonny Levy." This guy's about spit on himself. Nobody at the club had ever met him. He was a member at the yacht club,
Royal
but he
Yacht
never,
Squadron?
but he never went there. And so this Commodore never met the guy.
Good grief.
I worked with, well, I met him in 1972. I
You had a
had
business
Kike
card.
Ferro Marine.
I do.
Bonomi's 36-foot cigarette, and we rented Groves and Gutteridge, and he was in there building one of the cold mold boats. So I got to know him really well. I mean, 1972.
Yeah.
Everybody's young,
Right.
and his daughter Renata at the time, with the long blonde hair down to the crack there. Oh my God! I thought I was gonna have to get married for sure.
That was
You
Sonny's
scum.
daughter?
Well, but
Sonny's
his
daughter.
his
His
daughter ended
granddaughter.
up marrying, his daughter.
His granddaughter
Well,
races.
his daughter was
But
spectacular.
his daughter ended up marrying, come on, who's the famous fighter pilot in England? Atkins.
Peter Twist?
No, Atkins. Akins.
Akins.
Yeah, but
With the-
married
with the
to
bum hand?
his son.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Max.
Max Akins. Yeah,
Yeah.
but famous fighter pilot. In,
Oh, she married Max Jr.?
Yeah.
I didn't
Well, I don't know
that.
Max Jr., but one of the sons.
Oh,
I don't know
yeah.
which son it was.
Max Jr. had
Max
the
Jr.
bum
got a
hand.
little bit of
Yeah.
a club hand.
Yeah.
No, I don't know which son, but